Midweek Pictorial, April 22nd, 1920. The resentment of the wet elements in Chicago and Milwaukee against their alleged wrongs under the Prohibition Amendment has found expression in the formation of the Order of the Camels to protect personal liberty. Unlike the camels, the members of the order cannot go long without a drink. They welcome an oasis. Wreck of the first German commercial airplane which came to this country after the war. It was utterly ruined by a fall at Roosevelt Field, Long Island. The machine was an elaborate one, constructed of duralumin, and the wingspread was 48 feet. It had a luxurious cabin and was equipped with a 135 Bayern engine. Albert Edward, Prince of Wales and heir to the British throne, center, and his two younger brothers. At left is Prince Albert Frederick, born 1895, and at right is Prince Henry William, born in 1900. The trio were photographed at Portsmouth. Prince of Wales en route to Portsmouth on his journey to New Zealand, leaning from the window of his train to acknowledge cheers of schoolboys. British battlecruiser Renown bearing the prince and his suite passing through the Panama Canal. View taken at Pedro Miguel Locks. New attraction at the summer resorts near London, England. Army tanks, some of which have seen service during the war, have been acquired by enterprising concession holders, who are expecting good business from the holiday crowds that are looking out for thrills. Novel steel tank in the backyard of a Kansas City physician, in which is a chamber in which patients are placed for treatment by compressed air. It accommodates 72 people. The claim is made that the treatment is beneficial for neuritis, heart disease, rheumatism, pneumonia, and paralysis. Babe Ruth, the mightiest batsman of them all, seen for the first time in Yankee uniform. He made 29 home runs last season. His transfer from the Red Sox to the New York Americans at a reported cost of $125,000 was the sensation of the year. The great length of his bat is noticeable. All opposing pitchers view him with profound respect. Crowded stands at the Polo Grounds, April 14th, when the first game of the 1920 championship season was played between the Giants and the Boston Braves, the latter winning by 6-3. An infield fly had been raised by the batter, who was running to first, and the second baseman is preparing to take it. The right fielder is running in from his position to back up the play. Hank Gowdy, veteran catcher of the Boston National Leaguers, in position behind the plate during the game between the Giants and the Braves. He was the principal factor when the Bostons won the World Series from the Athletics. He was the first major league player who enlisted in the war. Jess Barnes, leading pitcher last year in National League, who pitched an opening game for Giants. Frank Frisch, young find of the Giants, who is expected to star at third base, succeeding Zimmerman. Brother played against brother in the opening game between Brooklyn and the Phillies. Mac Wheat, left, is shaking hands with his brother Zach. George Kelly, new first baseman of the Giants, who has the difficult task of trying to fill the shoes of Hal Chase, who is generally acknowledged to be the greatest first baseman ever in the game. Kelly is showing great promise. Umpires McCormick and Hart at the Brooklyn Phillies game, carrying the new balls on the field. No player must touch the balls till they are put in play. Eddie Ayers, Boston pitcher, whose work beat the Giants in opening game of the season at Polo Grounds. Two veterans of the game, Gabby Kravitz, manager of the Phillies, left, and Wilbert Robertson, manager of the Brooklyns, shaking hands before game. Although an element of tragedy was involved in the abortive cap revolt, it partook in some features of comic opera. It lasted just 5 days. The Baltic troops are here seen retiring through the same Brandenburg Gate that they had entered in triumph shortly before. Revolutionary detachment in Duisburg. The lack of uniforms and soldierly bearing is noticeable. This is a military outpost near the famous battlefield of Marasesti, where the Romanians with but 2 divisions inflicted heavy losses on 5 German divisions and saved northern Romania from invasion. The Romanian wounded were removed from the field in American Red Cross ambulances and treated by American doctors. On account of its sanguinary character, the Battle of Marasesti is known as the Gettysburg of Romania. The government plans to build a great national memorial there. Some of the 87 caskets containing the bodies of soldiers of the U.S. Air Service, who died of disease or other causes, and were originally buried in England. They are here ranged on a pier in Hoboken, after having been brought over by the transport Nansemond. Funeral procession of the Lord Mayor of Cork, passing along Camden Quay in that city. Great throngs crowded the streets, the hearse was covered with flowers, and there were manifestations of public sorrow. Sandwich men parading before the House of Commons while the Home Rule Bill was being discussed, carrying placards which represented the protests of Ulsterites and Unionists against the measure. The placards are violently anti-Sinn Féin in sentiment. Anti-Zionist demonstrations in Jerusalem, March 8th. Mobs of Arabs, resentful against the Jewish dominance in Jerusalem, are here seen listening to impassioned harangues by nationalist agitators. Between 7,000 and 8,000 Arabs, Turks, and Christians parading the streets of the Holy City as a demonstration against the proposal that Palestine be handed over to the Jews. Unique and historic protest by Arabs, Muslims, and Christians against Jewish rule over Palestine. Flags were waved bearing the inscriptions, "We ask for justice. We oppose Zionist immigration. Our land is for us. May he not live who betrays the fatherland." Petitions were presented to American, French, Spanish, and Italian consuls and the British military governor against the Zionist movement, and these officials promised to present them to their respective governments. Chicago stockyards put temporarily out of business because of the inability of the railroads to bring in stock. 40,000 men were thrown out of work. Passenger trains standing deserted in the Erie Railroad yards in Jersey City following the strike. Freight piled up at the West Shore Railroad Station in Weehawken, New Jersey. The scene is typical of scores of similar ones along the New York and New Jersey waterfronts, where the sudden desertion of work by strikers has tied up transportation. Oxford-Cambridge boat race of 1920 on the Thames, showing the crews as they were approaching Hammersmith Bridge. At that point, Cambridge was leading by half a length. This advantage was gradually increased until when the finish line was crossed, Cambridge was 4 lengths ahead. The betting favored Cambridge. The race was witnessed by enormous crowds that lined the riverbank along the course. Crowd at the Middlesex end of Hammersmith Bridge while the Oxford-Cambridge race was in progress. Every point of vantage was occupied, as can be seen by the human swarms on trees and balconies. Barge loads of spectators on the Middlesex shore and in strings of barges. No sporting event in England, except the Derby, causes such an outpouring. The race is the first that has been rowed between the rival universities since the end of the war. American Canoe Association holding their annual cruise on the Ramapo River in Rockland County, New York. One of the canoes is here seen shooting the rapids, which demands unusual care and skill to avoid an upset. There are plenty of fallen trees and snags, as well as rocks in the stream, and the danger lends an exciting element to the cruise. Members of Harvard's track team using full-length mirrors in training. This plan has been initiated by their coach, Whelan, who has found it a valuable aid in emphasizing his instructions. The men can study their own leg action as they run, and can detect and correct defects. One of the dangers ever present in steeplechasing is illustrated by this picture of a crash at Sandown Park in England, when Derry Boy falls and sober Luke throws his rider. The riders were in imminent peril, but escaped without serious injury. The hazards on English courses are difficult, and the sport is thrilling. Railroads are slower than reindeers in North Russia, where the railroad system has disintegrated. American Red Cross supplies are transported with Santa Claus's favorite steeds. Reindeers are able to make 9 miles an hour and keep it at 9 hours a day. The railroads do well if they average 6 miles an hour. Here is shown a convoy of empty sledges returning to Red Cross warehouses. The American officers in the party are holding a parley with an Eskimo. United States Blue Jackets dismantling one of the German submarines allotted to the United States by the peace treaty. Some idea of the complicated mechanism of these underwater terrors can be gained from the picture. Former German warship Nassau, which will come to the United States as a prize of war. Examination of the ships surrendered by the Germans under the terms of the peace treaty has shown that they are already antiquated and could with difficulty be used in present-day navies. The Nassau may be utilized for target practice. Launching of a big Cunarder for transatlantic service. She is named the Scythia and is here shown taking the water at Barrow, England. The vessel is 625 feet long, 75 feet wide, and is of 27,000 tons. She will burn oil exclusively, and is the first of her kind to be built for the Cunard Line. There has been a great development recently in British shipbuilding, and the losses occasioned by the war are being rapidly made up. West Point cadets going through their evolutions on the south field of Columbia University, April 11, 1920. The occasion was the annual visit of the Military Academy Choir to the university. Before services were held in the chapel, drill took place in the presence of a large throng of spectators, who applauded the faultless marching of the future officers. The High Cost of Living Division of the Department of Justice is helping housekeepers in the selection of cheap and nutritious cuts of meat. The chef of a large Washington hotel is giving a demonstration.